property. So we're going to talk about an estate, which is the degree, quantity, nature, and extent of ownership interest that a person has in real property. So again, an estate. What is an estate? It is the degree, quantity, nature, and extent of ownership interest that a person has in real property. So if you are talking about someone's estate, it's their interest in the real property. Owning and leasing are the two broad categories of estates that will be explored in this unit. So this unit covers the following topics: freehold estates, fee simple estates, life estates, leasehold estates, subleasing and assignment of leases, rights of landlord and tenant. Um, Estate is the degree or extent of interest a person has in real property. It is synonymous with right, title, interest, tenancy, and equity. A tenant is an individual who holds an estate. Two categories of estates: there's a freehold estate, which is an ownership interest, a leasehold estate, which is an interest that is less than freehold. So the right to possess and use property of another. So that's a leasehold estate. So again, there's two categories of estates. You got the freehold estate and a leasehold estate. Freehold estate is an ownership interest, which kind of doesn't make sense in terms of the name. Freehold estate is you have ownership interest, and a leasehold is an interest that is less than freehold. All right, so you're going to need to do some independent studying. I'm going to go over the unit summary and the unit quiz. All right, so the unit summary. You need to review these key points. A freehold, right, estate is ownership. So again, a freehold estate is what? Is ownership. It's a less than freehold estate is leasehold. So a freehold, you want to think ownership. A less than freehold estate is a leasehold. Freehold, ownership estate, leasehold, less than freehold estate. A fee simple estate is the highest form of ownership. Fee simple, right? It's the highest form of ownership. Fee simple. A life estate is an ownership interest created for a person's life. That's what we call a life estate. An estate in reversion is an interest held by the grantor, reverter, by which the grantor will reacquire the granted interest. An estate in remainder is an interest held by a person other than the grantor, by which they will acquire a greater interest in the future. The person who holds this interest is the remainder person, right? Or call him remainder man. An estate for years is created for a definite time period and has an ending date. An estate from period to period is for an indefinite period and automatically renews. An estate at will is for a license. An estate at sufferance is a situation in which the lease has ended, but the tenant is holding over wrongfully. That's a estate at sufferance. A sandwich lease is a lease in which the lessee, who becomes the sub-lessor, enters into a separate lease with another lessee, the sub-lessee. In an assignment of lease, the lessee, the assigner, transfers all rights in the lease to a third person, which is the assignee, who takes over the entire leasehold. Contract rent is the rent stated in the lease. Economic rent is the rent that could be obtained in the current market. Excess rent is the difference between the contract rent and the economic rent. A positive leasehold is a lease in which the economic rent is higher than the contract rent. A negative leasehold is a lease in which the contract rent is higher than the economic rent. The leaseor has the right to receive rent and the right of reversion lease at lease termination. The lessee has the right of quiet enjoyment and may keep trade fixtures at lease expiration. Trade fixtures are a tenant's personal property used in the tenant's business. Let's go to number one. The interest of a grantor who gives an interest with the expectation of getting it back is a revisionary estate. So it is C, revisionary estate. So revisionary estate is when you have the interest of a grantor who gives an interest with the expectation of getting it back is a revisionary estate. So revisionary return, so they're giving it the interest with the expectation of getting it back, right? A remainder estate, no. Life estate, no. Defeasible estate, no. So revisionary estate is the interest of grantor who gives an interest with the expectation of getting it back. That's a revisionary estate. What is the difference between fee simple and non-freehold? Fee simple and non-freehold. So it is alpha. Fee simple is freely inheritable. Fee simple is freely inheritable, while non-freehold is a lease. So think about freehold estate is ownership, but if I say non-freehold, that's a lease. Fee simple, that's the highest level of ownership, and that's going to be freely inheritable. So is it fee simple is for a person's life, while non-freehold is freely inheritable? No. Non-freehold has no time limit, while fee simple has a definite time. No. Non-freehold is for a person's life, while fee simple is a lease. No. 3, a transfer of possession of property, but not title, for a period of time for consideration best defines a what? A lease, right? Again, a transfer of possession, transferring possession of property, but not title. Transfer of possession, but not title, for a period of time for consideration best defines a lease, right? When you lease something, what are you doing? You're transferring the possession of property, but not the title. You're basically borrowing it for a period of time. You're renting it. You're leasing it. So a lease is a transfer of possession of property, but not title, for a period of time for consideration. So is it a distraint? No. A force and retain a detainer? No. Actual eviction? No. In a positive leasehold, what happens? The economic rent is higher than the contract rent. Okay, so that was like straight definition. So we talked about a positive leasehold is a lease in which the economic rent is higher than the contract rent. A negative leasehold is a lease in which the contract rent is higher than the economic rent. Okay, so a positive leasehold, you have to know this, is where the economic positive, so you got positive leasehold rent, is where the economic rent is higher than the contract rent. leasehold, right? Positive leasehold. The economic rent is higher than the contract rent. Okay. So the economic rent is higher than the contract rent. Okay. So you gotta remember, in a positive leasehold, the economic rent is higher than the contract rent. So is the contract rent higher than the economic? No. Contract rent higher than the marked rent? No. Is the economic rent lower than the contract rent? No. So you have in a positive leasehold, right, which is less than the ownership, and your economic rent is going to be higher than the contract rent. Number five, if at the end of a lease, the tenant is allowed to remain for an indefinite length of time, this estate is best described as what? Holdover tenancy. So if at the end of a lease, right, end of the lease, the tenant is allowed to remain for an indefinite length of time, right? They just can stay there for an indefinite length of time. This estate is best described as what? Holdover tenancy. So in a holdover tenancy, um, it's at the end of the lease. The tenants can remain for an indefinite length of time. So is it a estate at sufferance? No. Estate at will? No. Estate for years? Nope. When a tenant transfers the entire leasehold to a third party, it is what? It is an assignment, delta. So when a tenant it transfers the entire leasehold to a third party, it is an assignment. So they're assigning it, they're transferring the entire leasehold um, to a third party. It's going to be called an assignment. So is it a sublease? No. Assumption? No. Estoppel? No. Which of the following items would normally be considered to be a trade fixture? All right, this is going to be Charlie, store shelves. So store shelves, think about them. Store shelves are trade fixtures. Store shelves are going to be trade fixtures. What about lighting fixtures? Nope. Plumbing fixtures? No. Uh, Rafters and joists? No. But a store shelf, that's a trade fixture. So, in an office, say there's like you're at a Walmart, right? But say Walmart shuts down, then they're going to put in, say, Dollar Tree. Those store shelves that came with Walmart are trade fixtures, right? They're going to leave with Walmart, and it's part of their trade, right? Dollar Tree, if they moved into Walmart's office space, they would put different store shelves, right? So rafters and joists, no, they stay with the building. Plumbing, lighting, all that stays with the building. But a trade fixture can come with the business out when they sell the property or when their lease ends. In a sublease with a positive leasehold, who normally benefits from the excess rent? It's going to be Bravo, the sublessor. Sublessor. So that's in a sublease. the sublessor with a positive leasehold, right, normally benefits from the excess rent. So you got to remember if it's a positive leasehold or negative leasehold. If you have positive leasehold is a lease in which the economic rent is higher than the contract rent. If you have negative leasehold is a lease in which the contract rent is higher than the economic rent. So sublease, the subleasor benefits from the excess rent. A life estate would end by merger. Which of the following best explains merger? All right, this one's going to be Bravo. Remainder party buys the life tenant interest. So the remainder party buys the life tenant interest. So a life estate would end by merger. So which of the following best explains merger? So again, merger is where the rest of the property, um, meaning the remainder party, buys the life tenant interest. So is it the life tenant makes waste? No. The grantor dies without a will? No. Grantor failed to pay property taxes? No. After a lease expires, the tenants are living on the premises without the landlord's consent. The tenants are what? So after a lease expires, the tenants are living on the premises without the landlord's consent. The tenants are tenants at sufferance. Okay, so the lease has expired. So to be a tenant at sufferance, right? Somebody's suffering, and your lease has expired, so you're a tenant at sufferance. The tenants are living on the premises without the landlord's consent. So the landlord's suffering, right? Because lease expired, tenant's still there, tenant's not paying rent, and so the tenants would be called tenants at sufferance because the lease expired and they're still living there without the landlord's consent. So is a tenant at will? No. Tenants in common? No. Periodic tenants? No. So it's tenants at sufferance. So if the tenants are still there after the lease is expired and the landlord is not giving consent, it's called a tenant at sufferance. A sublease. So a sublease makes the original leasee a leaseor, right? So again, what does a sublease do? So it makes the original leasee a leaseor. So when you rent from somebody, you're a leasee, and then say you sublease that, now you've just become the leaseor, right? So um, there's the original leaseor, right? They lease it out to you, to the leasee, and then you sublease it out to someone else. So now you actually just became the leaseor to your leasee, right? So that's what happens when you sublease to someone else. Is it for basement premises? No. Assigns entire lease to a new tenant? No. Um, Terminates the original lease? No. It just makes the original leasee a leaseor. Original leasee a leaseor. A step up, right? So you're the leasee, you got the lease, and then you want to sublease to someone else, right? So now you are the leaseor and they are the leasee, right? You're the or giving the lease. All right. F rents from G. F installs shelves, cabinets, and other equipment in the building for use in her store. If the lease says nothing about these items, what happens? So bravo. So F rents from G. Okay, F is renting from G, and F installs shelves. So now, so G, right? Bravo. G owns them if F does not remove them before the lease expires. So F is renting from G. So F is the leasee, G is the leaseor, F is the renter, right? And if they don't remove their trade fixtures, right, the store shelves, right, cabinets, stuff like that, that's kind of proprietary to her business, then it belongs to the seller, to the owner. Um, Same thing as in renting units. If you're leasing and you don't get your stuff out, you got like about 2 weeks. I think it's what 14 days, something like that. That you have to get your belongings out of the property. Right, the owner can't just throw away your stuff the same day you move out or the next day. Right, they have to hold it for some time, and but if you don't get them after a period of time, they belong to the owner, and usually they're just thrown away. So F cannot remove the fixtures before lease expires. No. F can move it sooner. F can remove them anytime after lease expires. No. They are fixtures, and F has no rights to them at all. No. All right. The greatest ownership right an individual can have is called what? Fee simple, absolute. Right. That is the greatest ownership an individual can have. Right? It's called fee simple absolute. Is it leasehold? No. Life estate? No. Fee simple conditional? No. A leasee has an implied right of quiet enjoyment, and if the property is sold, the landlord must what? Charlie, protect the tenant from parties who claim superior title. Okay. So a leasee has an implied right of quiet enjoyment, and if the property is sold, the landlord must protect the tenant from parties who claim superior title. So, if you sell the property and the leasee, the renter are still there, um, and the contract extends that time, then the tenant typically can stay there if it's okay with the new owner. And if the property is sold, the landlord must protect the tenant from parties who claim superior title. So A says protect the tenant from people coming on the property from the outside. No. Pay the tenant's moving expenses. No. Soundproof the tenant's apartment. No. So protect the tenant from parties who claim superior title. 15. At a single family home, a lease A leases to B. So A is the leaseor, B is the leasee, and B subleases, right? Leases to C, so they're subleasing. So now B is a leaseor and C is a leasee. Who is responsible for the rent? So this one is going to be bravo. It's so A leases to B, B leases to C. So who's responsible for the rent? So ultimately, it's going to be B, right? Because B was the original leasee. So B is responsible to A. A is the leaseor. A needs to get paid, right? A is the owner. The leaseor gives it to the leasee, B. So the responsible party is B. That's the original leasee. Now, when you sublease to C, C needs to pay B. However, if it doesn't happen, the B is on the hook, right? The original leasee is on the book. The subleases, they're going to be on the hook to their leaseor, but ultimately the original leasee that did not sublease is responsible for the rent. A grantor conveyed a life estate to a party and also retained a future interest in the property. When the life tenant dies, the future interest is called what? Reversion. So reversion, when someone dies, so grantor conveyed a life estate to a party and also retained a future interest in the party when the life tenant dies. So when they do that, they know someone's going to die, and the future interest of the property comes back to the original owner. So it's called reversion. So is it remainder? No. Per atrevi? No. Fee tail? No. When a property is rented for only 1 month, this is called what kind of tenancy? So this one's going to be Charlie, 4 years. When a property is rented for only 1 month, this is called what kind of tenancy? 4 years. B sold his life estate to D, who recorded the deed. Y demanded that the property pass to her in fee simple title immediately. In this case, what? Alpha Y's claim is invalid because B controls his interest while alive. Again, so B sold the property to Y and reserved a life estate for B. Right, so B sold a property to Y and reserved a life estate for B. Y recorded the deed, then B sold his life estate to D, who recorded the deed. Now Y demanded that the property pass to her in fee simple title immediately. In this case, what happened? Y's claim is invalid because B controls his interest while alive. So again, while they're alive, Y's claim is invalid because B controls his interest while alive. So anytime of a person still alive, they still control their interest, right? Y's claim is valid. No, neither Y nor B have a claim to this property. No. B needed to obtain Y's permission to make the transfer. No. Which of the following elements is not characteristic of a fee simple absolute ownership? So the answer is A, reversion to the grantor. So which of the following elements is not characteristic of fee simple absolute ownership? So reversion to the grantor is not characteristic of fee simple absolute ownership. When it reverts back to the grantor, that's not a characteristic of fee simple absolute ownership. So B, ability to will, yeah, that's a characteristic of fee simple absolute ownership. Indefinite duration, yeah, they have indefinite. Ability to transfer, yes. But reversion back to the grantor, so reversion to the grantor, that would not be a fee simple absolute ownership. Number 20, when a lease is for an indefinite period of time, this is called what? This is called C. Charlie, estate at will. So again, when a lease is for an indefinite period of time, this is called an estate at will. So again, because it's a lease, you would, and it's indefinite period of time. There's no time period. There's no beginning and end. It's an indefinite period of time, so it's an estate at will. So freehold estate, no. Estate for years, no. Estate at will, yes. Estate at sufferance, no. A tenant rents a commercial space and installs a range hood above an oven used in the tenant's business. The range hood is a what? It is a Charlie trade fixture and can be removed by the tenant prior to the lease expiration. So range hood is a trade fixture and can be removed by the tenant prior to the lease expiration. So a tenant rents a commercial space and installs a range hood above an oven used in the tenant's business. The range hood is a trade fixture. So anytime you have a business or office and you install, fixtures that go along with that business, you can remove them at the end of your lease, and they're also called trade fixtures. So trade fixtures can be removed by the tenant prior to the lease expiration. So improve. So can it be a improvement to the property and part of real estate? No, you can't. So say a dental office takes over a building and they put in dental chairs and everything like that. Does the owner get to keep those forever? No, they go with the business. They're trade fixtures. Um, Fixture which is permanently attached and cannot be removed. No, again, they're trade fixtures. They can be removed, even though they're fixtures, but they're trade fixtures. A trade fixture which can be removed if the tenant pays the landlord for the cost of the range hood. No, the commercial business, when they installed it, um, that's how it happened. A man willed his residence to his widow, and upon her death, it was to go to two of his three children. The widow received a life estate. Alpha. So partial estate, no. Remainder estate, no. Leasehold estate, no. So again, a man willed his residence to his widow, and upon her death, it was to go to two of his three children. The widow received a life estate. Right? So life estate is when you will someone after you pass away. An assignment of lease performs what function? This one's going to be alpha. Conveys the leasehold to the assignee. Conveys the leasehold to the assignee. Conveys the leasehold to the assignee. So an assignment of lease performs what function? An assignment of lease performs what function? So A says conveys the leasehold to the assignee. B, conveys trade fixtures to the assignee? No. Conveys emblements to the assignee? No. Conveys title insurance to the assignee? No. So an assignment of lease performs what function? It conveys when you do an assignment of lease, that's going to convey leasehold to the assignee. An estate at will. An estate at will, what does that do? It can be canceled by the leasee or the leaseor at any time. So the leaseor, leasee, an estate at will can be canceled by the leaseor or the leasee at any time. So an estate at will can be canceled by the leaseor or leasee at any time. Does it have to be in writing? No. Is for a specific period of time? No. Must have rent being paid? No. Which of these statements is not true? So this one's going to be Bravo. When a tenant's interest in a lease is assigned, both the assignor and the assignee have liability to the landlord. Right. So this statement is true. So when a tenant interest in a lease is assigned, both the assignor and the assignee have liability to the landlord. A says subleasing or assign a lease always requires the leaseor's permission. No. In a positive leasehold, there is no excess rent. No. Economic rent may never be higher than contract rent. No. So when a tenant's interest in a lease is assigned, both the assignor and assignee have liability to the landlord. That's the true statement here. Which of the following would not be considered a fee simple absolute interest? So this one's going to be delta leasee with a long-term lease. Leasee with a long-term lease. So that would not be considered a fee simple absolute interest. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about Unit 27.